Welcome to the June episode of Amiga Ireland. I'm Irla.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Luke.
In today's episode, we have a massive mod collection available for download in one handy place.
We found some Amigas lurking in some surprising places.
Roadie, but it's not connected to music. Roadie is a tool for your favorite TCP IP stack.
Nice, we've got that and lots more to talk about. Before we get stuck in, how's everybody?
Fine, thank you very much. I've been enjoying my Ultimate 64. For those who don't know what Ultimate 64 is, it's an FPGA-based C64 by a great developer, Gideon. He's got really great stuff that he's been working on, like, for example, 1541 Ultimate emulator, but this is just a whole C64 in FPGA, and it's a great machine.
And that has the Ultimate 1541 built in as well, doesn't it?
That's right, you're right.
Remember right, yeah.
Correct.
I haven't seen one, but it sounds like a fantastic bit of kit.
Yeah, man, it is. I still, have to learn how to configure it properly, to set it up. Because there are, loads of options and loads of configurations and loads of things. So, just like I said, I'm enjoying it.
Good stuff.
Nice. I actually didn't realise that was out because just a few days ago I saw an article on it and it was announcing it, so there was no date. So that's great. It's actually available. Tempted. How about you, Rob?
The usual stuff for me. I've been busy with a few repairs. In particular, there's an Amiga 2000 here with Charlie from the Scottish Amiga user group that I've just got to boot again last night. So it's another one of these with a lot of battery damage. So take the batteries out of your Amigas, please. So it's recovering nicely. I'm looking at it here at my desk. And hopefully that's got a clean bill of health now. I had a couple of days there was when my wife and son were away, and for the first time in a long time I was able to sit down and play some games. But what I started playing was Exodus, which I'd never really played beyond the first level. And this is an Amiga game from the very, very end of the Amiga, kind of commercially. So around about the turn of the century anyway. And it's a real-time strategy, Command and Conquer type game. And it's quite good. It's, I always had the demo of it and played that. And then I found it was available on APC TCP, I think, for €3 or something, some very small amount of money anyway, as a download. And so I bought it, having wanted it 20 years ago. And yeah, it's pretty good. It's not perfect. There are better games out there, but it is definitely a fun way of spending a few hours.
Nice. Polish game, I think. It
is, yeah.
From 2001.
2001, there you go.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's clearly a Polish person who does the English voiceover. There's a distinct accent on it, let's say. But it's good. It's very good.
Cool. I'm glad you've been enjoying it.
Absolutely, yeah. And
what platform are you playing this on, Rob? Is it OS4?
I actually had it installed on OS4 and OS3, but it runs. It needs a hefty Amiga to run it at decent speed. But on the 060 and a graphics card, it runs very, very well. It's faster than you can keep up if you put it to maximum speed. So
I think it works pretty all right, even on 040, to be honest, as far as I remember.
Yeah. I remember it being a bit clunky when you don't have a graphics card. But
yes, that's right.
That's the thing that slows it down, really, But I'm sure it's fine. Like I said, it's faster than you can play if you set the speed to maximum. So I don't think there's any problem for an 040.
Nice.
There's one for the vampire people, actually. That'd be an ideal kind of game.
True. Well, I've been troubleshooting and upgrading my Amiga. I've been on a wild goose chase for the last 3 weeks. Rob and Luke, you know little bits about it probably from me messaging you the odd time, but in the end, so it looks like there was a hardware issue because every time I go to boot, I get a guru straight away. And I have a hard disk in my Amiga 1200. But then when I booted with Workbench disk 1, booted up fine and I could access the hard disk. So I thought, okay, the hard disk isn't the problem. It must be the hardware, and there was reason for the hardware to be suspected because when I was moving a plant, I neglected to bring the bottom tray with it, and it dripped loads of water all over the Amiga 1200. So thankfully the keyboard does a really good job of capturing most of that, but it did short out the machine and cause it to shut down quickly. So I thought, okay, I have a hardware fault. after weeks of trying all kinds of things, like, I got Diagram from Rob, so I booted that up and checked the system from those ROMs that checked all the, the registers and stuff like that. I went to Bambi Amiga and I got Amiga SysTest from Darren sent over. Thanks, Darren, for that. And I just couldn't find what was wrong. And so in the end, it turned out that the problem was with the map-ROM file had been corrupted during the shutdown. And it was at the early part of the startup sequence. And the reason I didn't find it is pretty funny, actually, because you can reboot the Amiga with the 2 mouse buttons down and tell it to skip the startup sequence, okay? So I was doing that. But the thing is, map-ROM can survive a reboot, from what I read about it online. So because my power switch is behind the desk, I was going behind the desk, I was turning on the Amiga, it was booting up once itself, then I was walking around the desk, sit down, reboot, but it's too late then, the map-ROM has already happened. So weeks of this going on. So eventually, for some reason, I decided to take the mouse and around behind where the switch is with me, press the switch and hold down the 2 buttons, and I finally got into a shell where I could edit the startup sequence, and things started recovering from there. Crazy.
A learning experience, though.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I learned so much. Yeah, some nice treats coming in the post, including Retro Ready, nice SD card adapter for the hard drive. Happy days.
Enjoy.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it's a bit faster than the compact flash, I think. Or am I imagining that?
No, it might be faster. Just a little bit, but it is.
I think anything made in the last 20 years is going to outpace the IDE on that 1200. That's the thing. So, I don't know. I can't imagine there's much of a difference now.
Just a little bit, probably.
Yeah, it's just basically the file, or the sector layout or something like that causing one of those things.
Phew. All right, let's move on to the news. AGA Blaster is a 68K Amiga CDXL video player. It works without needing a graphics card or extra or non-chip memory. So there are video examples of it running on an Amiga 4000 and 060. And there's a download available at the link that we have here in the show notes. It's a very impressive quality. And I don't know what machines it does run on beneath the 4060. So if you do try it out and it works for you on your configuration, I'd be curious to hear about it.
Go ADF is a new application that's been released recently. As the name might suggest, it's for dealing with ADFs, which the Amiga disk image files. So they're images of floppy disks that are often used in emulators and that. But it's an application that lets you handle them on the Amiga. So up till now, there's always been sort of device drivers and stuff for mounting disk images as disks on the workbench, and then there's another tool for reading and writing ADFs. But this is basically sort of a one-stop shop for all your ADF uses and needs and stuff like that. So you can use it to open an ADF and examine it, see what file system it uses, modify files in it, modify the disk sectors directly. You can mount virtual drives, you can copy them, you can copy files in and out of them. It's a lovely little bit of kit, or a bit of programming, and Go ADF, and it's out now.
Another little commodity called Albatross. It's a lock screen for your 68K Amiga. You can actually lock your Amiga with a word. It's been written in Blitz Basic and seems to be fun for someone who's interested in security and securing his Amiga and his system.
Whoever that may be.
That's crazy.
That's right.
I actually remember writing one of them when I got my Amiga first, just because I had Blitz Basic on a disc, and all it did was open up a new screen in front of Workbench. So all you had to do was the keyboard shortcut to flip the screens, and
there you go.
It. Yeah. So not exactly secure, but it was just a little exercise.
A little programming exercise.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing that I think once I install it, I might find a reason for it after,
Yeah, absolutely.
Start keeping a diary or something on the Amiga, who knows? Right, there's a new release of AMI Timekeeper, which provides an NTP service for networked Amigas. There is no installation required beyond copying this in. It's operated as a commodity and is controlled by Amiga OS, so all you need is an internet connection on your machine. This is quite nice. I'm already using something else, but if you have a networked machine, it is actually nice to have networked time. It means you don't need a real-time clock in certain circumstances anyway. For my uses, it would replace a real-time clock. So yeah, that's a nice little one.
Boot Picture now is another new release on AmiNet, and it, as the name says, it's basically a small utility you put in your startup sequence, and it will display a picture. So instead of staring at the black screen, you get whatever image you like. It can also play sounds, and it's a simple little command line tool, and yeah, it does exactly what it says on the tin.
I wonder if you put, a red picture or something in there with people, the way there's the boot codes, the colours on the screen. Could you confuse somebody?
Absolutely. Yeah, give people a heart attack. Yeah.
Amiga Demo Launcher, actually, this is, I think, how you pronounce it, Launcher, is an application to replay executable file demos for a playback queue. I think it might be a useful thing for you, Irla, for next meeting, for example. Although you've got that great script written by Rob, that might be a useful tool for you, or for anyone who likes demos and who likes to put them, without loading them on, or going to the computer and going to, drawers and opening up and then blah, 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 and so on. So this is all automatic, or can be automatic, actually. I think it's a useful tool.
Cool.
Very useful. Yeah. Yeah, I am sorted. I got a nice script off Rob. It wasn't that far off from the event, actually. I was kind of pulling my hair out.
That was a quick and dirty script, so this launcher might be a better job now. It'd be worth checking out.
I think the script did the job really well last time. Anyway.
Fair enough.
It did, actually. Yeah, it was spot on.
Cool.
It was nice and easy.
Okay. Witcher CDTV is a new piece of hardware that's available and listed on 7bit.pl. These guys make a lot of awesome hardware. This is, it looks to be, just by the name, it sounds like the CDTV specific version of their Amiga 500 accelerator, which is a great little card. So this fits in the CPU socket, and it's in the CDTV. The space is a little bit tight, so this will fit in the CPU socket and give it a pretty hefty speed boost and a bit of RAM as well. Could turn into a pretty respectable WHD load machine.
That's right. And I think for the time being, CDTV was a bit of a forgotten machine. So now it's something that people who have CDTV, they have a chance to update it.
Absolutely, because like I said, space is a bit tight in there, and you could get some 500 stuff to work.
Very tight.
But it depended a lot on the board.
If I still had a hi-fi system, I think I would want to get one to slot in with all the other stuff. Do either of you have a hi-fi?
When you say hi-fi, I've got a set of shelves with a load of different units on it. Does that count?
There's a sort of there's a standardized sort of dimensions for them, so they stack up.
They stack up on top of each other. Things tended to drift away from that. So when you buy modern gear, it's all different sizes. But that hasn't stopped me stacking them up now. But it just looks stupid.
Great to see this kind of crazy Jenga electric.
Exactly, yeah.
Stack.
So like my TV box is narrower and deeper than the Blu-ray player underneath it, which is wide and skinny and short, and it's. But hey, I've only got so many shelves.
Exactly.
Too much gear.
Who killed the American demo scene? This is a really cool article I found on Vice.com. The author went to Synchrony, which is one of the USA's last active demo parties, and talks about why not only the demo scene died in America, but also the death of the Cracktro, which sometimes gets forgotten actually among the demos. He interviews Dr. Claw, who talks about how while modern games are cross-platform or possible, the Cracktros and the demos are about target hardware, so our gamers today aren't really able to make Cracktros or demos as much as they used to be, unless they target them for an API instead of hardware, but then, that's kind of a different... Yeah, and the game dev is more accessible to student coders, so that's what they're learning. That's only a little nugget from it. It's a really interesting chat. So if you're into the demo scene, or if there was ever any Cracktros you really liked, I know I really liked some that were even better than the games I played at the time. So well worth a read.
Luke mentioned this earlier, but there's a little program called Roadie after being released. It's a commodity, and it's a basic GUI for controlling Roadshow. So this lets you do things like, from a couple of buttons on the interface, it lets you put it online and offline and send some pings and adjust gateway settings and, some of the more fundamental stuff. the most common things that you would be doing with your TCP stack. Because, for the moment, Roadshow doesn't have a GUI on OS3. It's quite nice, even though there are commands for doing these things. It's nice to have a button you can just click for some of the stuff. So this is the first release. This is by Graham up in the Scottish, one of the Scottish Amiga users. It's his first program for the Amiga. So, it's a good effort so far, and he's got big plans for it.
Nice one. Well done, Graham.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people wanted to have a GUI for Roadshow, and they've been saying that or not having a GUI is the biggest disadvantage for them if it comes to Roadshow. For me, it's a huge advantage actually, but it's all a matter of preference, I think.
Absolutely, and the thing is, this is as far as he can make it. It's going to be that it doesn't interfere with any of the config files, or if you've got customized config files, that it won't break them. It'll try its best to keep them intact and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it should go hand in hand with with basically any Roadshow setup, and that's the plan anyway. But the future plans are also to validate settings and an AREX port as well. So for example, your email client can put Roadshow on and offline when it needs to, and things like that. So little things like that.
Yeah, I actually downloaded it and ran it when I got pinged on that thread, and it runs and I can see it. But it turns out I have a problem with my Roadshow installation. So 2 steps forward, 1 step back on Amiga.
Absolutely,
you'll get there. Don't worry.
Yeah, thanks for that, Graham. It's great. All right, let's move on to the gaming section.
Right, Renegade Deluxe is a game that we've already mentioned. It's another update. The game this time has got improved graphics, and it's a nice shooter. It's a top-down shooter, and it can be played with 2 players, and it's pretty nice, pretty alright, I think. Yeah. Has anyone played that one, guys?
I have played it, yeah. An earlier version of it. I haven't seen it since this update, but it's similar to Alien Breed, but with split screen. You know, so and that's kind of how it plays. So it's a split screen deathmatch, and it works quite well. So running around a complex with the sort of the Alien Breed style. Yeah, that's vaguely the idea anyway.
That's right.
It's quite good. Reshoot Or has been released. This has been sort of on the cards for a release for a while. Now, this is a sort of it's an almost abstract shoot 'em up. And it's a side-scrolling shooter, and it runs really smooth, and it's very colourful, very lovely, and yeah, the graphics are gorgeous. It's just abstract, things are sort of semi-random shapes and stuff like that, rather than you're a spaceship. So it's a kind of really interesting aesthetic to it, but it looks really, really good, and it's, as I said, it's very smooth, very polished, and it's been looking forward to this for a while.
Raging Orlando is a Commodore 64 game in development, but the preview is available now and it looks really good, actually. A lot of thought has been put into the interaction between sprites. There are possibilities that way, not just between the characters and your player, but also objects and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's a nice one. Warlock-entertainment.com is where it is, Raging Orlando.
And another C64 one here, Parallaxian. It's a very, very nice looking shooter on the C64. It's currently on Kickstarter looking for funding. And you have to have a look at some videos that the developers put up, because it looks really impressive. You can tell it's a C64 game, but it's got multiple levels of parallax, as the name would suggest, and you can fly left and right, and it's a shooter, and there's also sort of ground attacks that you can do on ground targets. It's very nicely done. There's a lot of sprite multiplexing. As I said, the parallax. Technically it's very an impressive feat, and I believe the developers from Armagh as well. So hello if you're listening. But that's on Kickstarter, and if you like to look at that, it could be well worth backing that, because it's one of the most impressive C64 games I've seen in a while.
I've been reading a bit about this game today, actually, and there are some new programming, actually, like techniques or even tricks used there's a technique that was invented, last year for C64. So this looks really, really impressive, and a lot of magic actually is under the hood, going under the hood. So, fingers crossed for that one. And I hope the author of this game will prepare something new as well, apart from this one. He's got a lot of potential,
Absolutely.
really loads of potential.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we're saying, some very impressive stuff shown up in the last while.
I have a Commodore 64 under my desk in a box, floppy drive, cassette, the whole thing. All I actually need to do is sort out an upscaler to connect it to a monitor. I really should get the finger out to do that. All right, well, let's move on to discoveries. This is my favourite section, by the way. I found out this month that the IFF format was created by Electronic Arts. There's a great explainer, a really thorough explainer, simplified by Sander van der Berg in the Netherlands. And he talks about his work bringing IFF support to the SDL library and then backporting it to Amiga OS, which is interesting as well. So he breaks down the whole format and talks about how we have brought it into SDL. So, you might not be familiar with all the different moving parts there, but you'll definitely learn something about the Amiga reading it. It's nice. The IFF is everywhere, so if you're into file formats at all on the Amiga, IFF is an important one, and this is a really accessible guide.
It was very ahead of its time. It's kind of almost like a binary XML, because it's all about separate lumps of
brilliant way of putting it.
Data in your files. Each segment has its own header and its own size and its own description, and you can have multiple file formats within the one container file, and it's a very sophisticated format that was also perfectly suited to a low-end machine. It was a great setup. The AIFF format that we have now is pretty much a direct descendant, and it has, for audio, if you have that, it's not exactly the same, but when you actually look at it in a binary editor, it's clearly the same intent anyway.
Oh wow, that's the Apple one, isn't it?
Well, it is used a lot by Apple, but I don't think it was Apple that came up with it. And I could be wrong. I thought it existed as a sort of an independent thing by one of the big audio crowds, but I could be wrong.
You're probably right. No, I only say it because I saw it on Apple machines is where I came across it the most, but I don't know the history of it. Okay, that's really cool.
If you're super interested in the formats, if you go to the Amiga OS wiki, there's a register of all the IFF file format types, so all the container types and all that, and a lot of them have a very detailed description, so you can read and write any of the files if you want to. So all the formats are there, and well, a lot of them are fully documented. So, but especially all the older graphics formats and audio formats, there's clear documentation on how to encode them and decode them. And that's all on the wiki.amigaos.net.
Brilliant! Oh my god, there's no excuse.
There you go. But like I said, it's similar to XML, but in binary, so it's not human readable as such. A bit of poking around with some code, and it's quite interesting. Anyways, my discovery here there just a few days ago. Well, I was at a friend's house and we were playing Superhot, which is it's a very interesting first-person shooter that's really suited to VR. So we had the VR headset, and it's a first-person shooter, but it's abstract. It's like the impression is that you're in a simulator in the game, and it's all bullet time. So time slows down, speeds up depending on what you're doing. So you can see bullets coming to you, and you can block them with the side of your gun, or you can dodge out of the way depending on what's happening. So it's a very interesting concept. But there's a bit in it where you break out of this simulator. You come out of the simulator and all of a sudden you're in this room full of computers. And right there in the desk in front of me is an Amiga 4000. And it's like, what? I couldn't believe it.
Brilliant.
And basically to get back into the game proper, you have to put a floppy disk into the disk drive on this Amiga. and then you're back in the simulator. And it's like, cool. What? There's clearly some love for the Amiga in the asset designers there.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
My discovery is an ASCII art subreddit. And there's also a Petsky art subreddit. So it looks absolutely amazing, like a graphics made out of letters or special signs, like ASCII signed or Petsky signed for C64. And it reminds me of a film called, I don't know if you remember it, from 1983, War Games.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, a game like that, BBSs and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So if you like it, go and look it. and enjoy it.
Right. Oh, yeah. I nearly forgot my main discovery that I talked about at the beginning of the show. You can download 4 ISOs with 18,000 mods on them from archive.org. The compilation was actually made quite a few years ago, but it's just been uploaded to archive.org, from what I understand. And we've got the link here. I downloaded the 4 ISOs. I've mounted one of them, and I'm never going to get through all of the songs on it.
No, you need at least 3 lives, I think. It's just like with demo scene. You just need like at least 7 lives to go through all those demos and crack throws and intros and all that stuff. It's the same story. Yeah. Right. Another discovery, and it's a way of connecting A500 to the internet with just a null-modem cable, serial cable, and PC. That tutorial has been made by AmigaLove.com, and it's a really good one. It's got pictures. The explanation is simple, and I presume it works. But it's gonna be slow, but it's possible. It's doable. So if you are persistent enough and you want to try it, go for it. Then it might be a bit slow.
Yeah, but a lot of stuff with the Amiga is like because you can.
Because you can, that's right. But this because you can is going to be really slow. Right, but it works.
Oh, what I like about that idea is, like on the Amiga, from a stock Amiga 500, like you've an awful lot of work to do to sort of get it online, because this just lets you bypass all of that. Right, my discovery is a thread that I needed, which was a list of the Guru meditation numbers categorized and explained. There's one caveat that, unfortunately, it's not always as simple as, if you've got this guru that says whatever number, then that is the problem. It's likely a symptom of something else, but it can help you narrow things down and, prevent you wasting a lot of time. Maybe you are looking in the wrong places potentially. And do you ever use the gurus, Rob, whenever you're trying to, suss out what's going on with the machine? Or do you
try to avoid them, to be honest?
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, well, yes and no. No, to be honest, they're of limited use, really. Like you say, because what you're seeing is the end result of the problem, not what the problem is. And this is a problem. It's the same with the boot colors. That there are charts for what the boot colors mean as well, and it sometimes throws people off altogether. And I've seen people replacing all the RAM in their machine because they got a green boot screen.
That's right.
It's like, yes, it's a RAM error, but that doesn't mean your RAM's dead. So it's one of these things that you have to sort of you bear it in mind, but it's just one of the many things you need to look at. It can be helpful, but
the thing is, it all comes with experience. That's the thing.
Yes, exactly.
It's pretty obvious for you. It's pretty obvious for me because we've got many years of experience. Mm-hmm. But for example, for Irla, he's just trying to find out his ways right now, and he's been learning all the Guru meditation numbers. He's been learning, the colors, the boot screen colors. He got himself a diagram as well. Mm-hmm. So it's a good direction.
Yeah, but think of it as an aid rather than like you say.
That's right.
It's never it's rarely as simple as one equals the other. But there is one guru that does show up, and it's a fairly obvious one. It's the one ends in B, and that's
that's right.
It's a CPU instruction not supported or something. So usually means it's looking for an FPU or it's looking for a higher CPU than you have in the machine, and that's kind of a straightforward one, but. Other than that, it's kind of, what was happening at the time? And, if you really want to delve into it, you can get some debug info over the serial port at that point, but that's for another day.
Actually, that would make a good Ask Amiga question for next time, Rob, even though I'd be interested in that, how to connect to the serial port and get the info from it.
Yeah. But it's not a huge thing, but there's a little bit there, yeah.
I think I got lucky with that list. I went and looked up the codes, and it said it had a problem with exec.library and workbench.library. So I thought, okay, potentially it was something around that. So I thought, okay, maybe those files are corrupted. So at that point, it was when I started commenting out the load modules and the what's the other one, MapROM, and suddenly, bingo, hallelujah, all working. So, I suppose it's kind of like Clippy. Sometimes it's helpful.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And that's, in your case, that was a good pointer because it was exec was, there's something corrupt in the very sort of core of the system there. But you can also get exec errors from something that overwrites RAM. So if you get a bad pointer somewhere, that will often show up as an exec error. And that could be just someone's been lazy programming something, So it can be a massive red herring, but in your case, it was the right thing. So yeah, that's the way it goes.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to events.
Right, I'm going to start with the Norwich Games Festival, and that took place last week. Massive festival, loads of people, loads of computers, loads of consoles. Brilliant. And our Norwich Amiga group was taking part in that as well. So if you'd like to see it and maybe visit it next year, because I think it's on a regular basis every year, around the end of May, have a look on the Facebook group, check the photos. I'm sure you'll enjoy it, and see you next year, perhaps.
Nice. Oh, actually, we meet in the Computer and Communications Museum of Ireland the first Friday of every month, but this month it's not happening. There's been a slight mix-up, and there's some renovations now are going to be taking place in its place. So it'll be the following month, the 5th of July will be the next meet-up there, and we're going to have some interesting stuff for all the Amiga diagnostic accoutrement I have gathered over the last few weeks is going to be there and given a sort of a dedicated space. So if you want to bring in a sick Amiga to us, one of the Fridays that we meet up, we can, put in diagram, we can put in the Amiga sys test and see what we can get out of it. And, even if we're not in a position to repair it, we might be able to diagnose it and narrow down what needs to be done. So you can at least get to the point where you can order parts maybe, or take us along that route. And actually, speaking of the Amiga Ireland event, the contract has finally been signed with the venue, which means we can now get to nailing down the final details and putting the tickets up online at some stage. I'd initially said February, we put them straight up, but because we had to change venue, we were initially going to go with one new venue, but then it wasn't quite right for us, so we actually had to change to another one right beside it. But just because of that question, it wasn't right to put tickets up online. We've got a fantastic venue, the Sheraton Hotel. We agreed to it ages ago, but the contract has just been signed now. So I'm looking forward to that. They've got a really nice setup. They've got good facilities. They can partition. It's a massive room. It's about at least three times as big as last year's place. And they can partition it into thirds with a projector in each third, and they can separate the microphones and speakers for each one. So you can have, say our guests giving a talk in one third, and you can have someone giving a workshop and something else in another third, and you can have a game competition on a projector in another third, whatever we want. Yeah, really nice. And the ticket prices aren't going to change this year as a result, which is nice.
Awesome.
That's really good.
Good stuff. And what date is that again, Irla? Because I don't think you mentioned it.
That's a good question.
Putting you on the spot now.
It's okay. I'm going onto the website to look for it. I think it's the 17th and 18th of January 2020.
Professional outfit here. Cool.
Yeah. So 17th and 18th. Yeah, that's right. And AmigaUsers.ie is where the tickets are going to be made available. And we will, post about it on all our social media sites when that comes out, with details of who the guests are and stuff like that. This coming event. Yeah, so I hope as many of you as possible can make it, because the subsequent years are always dictated by the turnout, of the current year. So last year we made enough money to pay for, a good venue this year that could fit the people that wanted to come.
Yeah.
So as long as we get, a relatively decent turnout, we'll continue to be fine. Okay, let's move on to Ask Amiga.
Okay, so there was a question on the Retro Computing Stack Exchange there a little while ago, and it was basically concerning the old-style CPU sockets and even not-so-old-style CPU sockets that are in, basically, I'd say almost every retro computer has a chip socket somewhere in it. Like even the more modern Amigas, the 1200 and that, the Kickstart ROMs are in IC sockets, and basically that design, you'll find them from, all the way through from any computer in the 80s all the way through to the Amiga 1200 and the CD32. So And basically the question and the discussion was about corrosion on the contacts and the contacts in general. So basically there's the contacts that are in those chips are they got the little flap of metal that presses the chip leg against another flap of metal, and that gives you a decent contact. And those contacts are usually tin plated. All is well and good for many years afterwards. But, it reaches a stage where sometimes a computer won't work, and all it takes is to take out the chips and put them back in. And, it's like, why wasn't that working before? So, and that's sometimes it. And it's because you get a buildup of corrosion on the contacts, and it basically means that you get, electrical resistance in between, and, so you lose signal integrity going to some of the pins, and that causes crashes, it causes all sorts of problems. So, on top of that, nowadays in the Amiga land, you're getting a lot of add-ons that fit into the CPU socket and into the kickstart sockets and things like that. And they tend to abuse the sockets a little bit because they've got round pins and the sockets are made for the flat pins on chips. So you get these kind of issues that sort of you cause the chips contacts to lose their springiness, and you get corrosion on the surface of the contacts. And all that adds up to sort of having a bad day and unstable computers and stuff. So, well, what can be done about corrosion? And because, the chips have got these tin contacts on them. And, well, you can plate things in gold. And that is how sort of when you get higher quality connectors and chip sockets, they tend to have a very thin layer of gold on the contacts.
I've always wondered what that was about.
There you go. And you'll get it on audio connectors, sort of higher end headphones and stuff like that. You'll get gold connections on them. And the idea is that gold doesn't tarnish. So it doesn't react with anything. It's pretty inert, and it doesn't rust, it doesn't corrode. And therefore you should, in theory, always have a clean connection. So that's all well and good. But you've got a problem when not everything's coated in gold, because you've got tin that's on the chip legs, and you've got gold on the contacts. So the gold is still fine, but what'll happen is you've got this thing called galvanic corrosion, and basically when you mix dissimilar metals, you get a very low voltage created between them, and that causes corrosion. So your gold contacts will be fine, but your chip legs are going to corrode anyway, and this is a problem. And it's sort of there's a table of metals basically, and the further away two things are on this table, the more corrosion you get when you touch them off each other. So you might be familiar with this if you have alloy wheels on your car and you haven't had to take a wheel off in, let's say, a year. And then you suddenly got a puncture and you try to take the wheel off and it's jammed solid onto the hub.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because your wheel is magnesium and the hub is steel. And magnesium and steel are quite far away from each other on that on that scale. So over the year, basically the two have rusted and fused together, and that's it. So you have to kick the bejesus out of the wheel basically to get it off of the hub. And once you do that, it's fine again. So usually you put a bit of grease, a bit of copper grease on that to stop that from happening. But that's usually what causes it. That's the same thing, and that can cause chips to corrode even in gold sockets. But obviously better in gold sockets than in tin or nickel sockets. But it'll always happen. And well, basically, there's no real way to avoid it, but you can reduce the effect by keeping everything clean. So oil from your fingers and moisture from the atmosphere, that all accelerates it. And if it was in a vacuum, it wouldn't happen. But if you can get rid of the moisture, get rid of don't touch the contacts with your fingers, that'll add years onto the amount of time it takes to go bad. So, there you go. There's a whole world of science basically dedicated to galvanic corrosion, and we touch off it in work with our medical devices as well. But it's if you're into your metal and your physics and your that end of things, it's quite an interesting read to have a look at that in general, and in specifically with the metals involved in microchip legs. But it'll still happen today if you plug, if you have connectors that aren't moved for a year or two and you suddenly find they're basically stuck together. And it's probably because they're two different metals and they just corroded into each other.
And Rob, what's the earliest stage somebody can catch that with the naked eye?
If things start to look dull, but see, the problem is you probably won't catch it with the naked eye because it'll be very localized. It'll only be where the metals are touching, you see? So it'll be right down in the chip connections themselves.
I get you.
Yeah.
So it'll manifest really as a problem before you notice it.
Yeah, basically you'll have instabilities or refusing to boot or something, because if it's kickstart chips or if one of the custom chips, you start getting weird graphics glitches or again, refusing to boot or whatever. But yeah.
So it's a case really of doing all your contacts then and really not, rather than being selective, I suppose.
So, and I wouldn't recommend like pulling your chips out every 6 months and sticking them back in because you're going to wear the sockets. But, although you can replace the sockets, like I said, with, turned pin sockets with gold contacts, and they're a much more resilient socket. But, you don't, basically I wouldn't say it's something you can prevent other than when you do have chips out that you give them a clean with some alcohol or something like that and then put them in. It's just a fact of life, basically. And, you'll probably still get it in, the only way to avoid it, sorry, I should say that, is to have the exact same metal on both sides of the contact. So that's why a modern CPU, if you look at a modern CPU that goes on like an AMD chip or an Intel chip, the contacts will be gold. And even going back to the O30, the O40, O60, the pins were gold or gold plated. And that was so that they wouldn't all get fused into the socket. Because if you're trying to pull a chip that has 100 and something pins, you're going to snap the chip in half if it corrodes in the socket. So the sockets and the chip both had gold connections, or at least gold plated. There's not a whole lot of gold involved. It's only like a less than a micron thick.
Okay, that's interesting, Rob. Thanks. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to online activity. Our top tweet of the month is a congratulations and best wishes to Chris and his beautiful 2-month-old baby. Probably going on 3 months now, actually. Congrats, Chris. That's a lovely photograph of Chris with his newborn baby and him wearing his Amiga Ireland t-shirt. Sweet picture. Yeah, really
awesome.
Nice touch. Our top Facebook post was by Daniel, and it's a Amiga themed watch face on one of those Android watches, so we've got 2 people in the group at least with them now. Mm-hmm. Mark and Daniel, and there's a couple of Amiga faces on them, which is cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, it looks the part. That's the one that looks like Workbench 1.3, doesn't it? It's the blue and
right.
orange. Yeah. It's cool looking.
There are so many themes actually you can install. I think I've seen C64 as well, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
lovely.
And we've got some new members in the group too. So hello to Zishan Malik, Lukács, Herod, Daniel Kulecka, Un Mundo de Retro Juegos,
Kuba Herman, Sarah Christina Burrows, Liam Young, and Miss Mad Lemon.
Paul Harrington, Amiga Klaus Commodore, and James Brown.
Nice. Hi everybody.
Yeah, welcome along.
Well, that's it for today. Music was by Virtual Dimensions and banjo guy Ali. Please leave us a review wherever you find us, and we're going to play out today with song number 4, 4th place at the Amiga Ireland 2019 mod competition. This is by Vic Zoltar and it's called Start Over Again. We'll see you next month. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Luke Kuchar to check out 3. Luke Kuchar to check out 3.